Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session of the Science and Technology Committee. We have a few people here this morning because the Republican caucus is meeting at 6:06 to discuss the 2012 budget. And I encouraged, as did the speaker, that most freshmen particularly attend that because they need to know what's in the budget. But this morning we are very happy and proud to have with us Dr. Aziz, who's the president of, and I better read it because I will never for years, Georgia Health Sciences University and CEO of MCG Health Systems. Thank you for being with us, sir, and we turn it over to you.
Very much appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. The name now just simply says what we are. We are Georgia's Health Science University, so we will do that. I thought I'd use this morning to do a couple of things. One, tell you a little bit about the university. Two, give you a perspective on trends in biomedical research and where the world is going in regards to that. And then three, end up with sort of a series of examples of what we as a university are doing to tackle some of these challenges. We really feel that our obligation to the state is significant, and we are obviously intending to become one of the top-tier academic health centers in the country. Academic health centers are a very unique animal. They're a combination of a university higher learning center and a research institution and a clinical services. And so this is a very different structure than you would find at a standard university. So they tend to be hubs of innovation both in research, education, and clinical care. And our university is one of 15 or so freestanding health sciences universities in the United States. These are very unique. We have 5 colleges with about 2,400 students, colleges of dental medicine, nursing, allied health sciences, graduate studies, and the Medical College of Georgia, which is obviously the original medical school upon which the university grew. We are only one of 2 vertically and horizontally integrated academic health centers in Georgia, and that means that truly, in order to further biomedical research, you actually have to have an integrated system. You have to have physicians and scientists and health practitioners who actually operate across the spectrum of research and education and clinical care. You have to have students who do the most basic of research to the most advanced, or basic education to the most advanced. And so the only other academic health center that is integrated in Georgia is Emory and ourselves. And we include the nation's 13th oldest and actually 6th largest medical school in the country. We also are Georgia's only school of dental medicine, Georgia's largest advanced nursing degree program. We train about 1 in every 4 dentists and 1 in every 5 physicians in Georgia. Our health system is the 2nd largest Medicaid provider in Georgia, largest outside of Atlanta. We're the 2nd largest children's hospital in Georgia, largest outside of Atlanta. We're the largest regional cancer center outside of Atlanta. And we train 450 medical residents and 50 dental residents every year. And that accounts for about 20% or 1/5 of all the GME slots in the state and 75% of the graduate dental education slots in Georgia. So we do a tremendous amount of work. And while often we feel that Augusta may be a little far, the truth is that we are central to the education. We provide about 500,000 patient visits yearly, and we provide over $100 million in uncompensated care every year above and beyond our services to various populations. Now, we have a very large footprint. We have about 800 sites across the state. We have 4 regional campuses. Some are virtual, some are physical. We have a campus in northwest Georgia centered around Rome, which has 3rd and 4th year students. We have a campus in southwest Georgia centered in Albany, and that has residential students, 3rd and 4th years who stay there. We have a campus in southeast Georgia centered in Savannah and Brunswick, and now that has been converted from a rotational campus to an actual residential. The students go there and stay for the 3rd and the 4th year. And finally, we have a partnership campus with UGA in Athens, which is a complete 4-year program. The computer has frozen. We will have to think about it. There we go. So our research highlights, we have about $100 million in extra mural funding, and we've had 3 consecutive years of greater than 20% increase. We are investing heavily in research. And we have a number of major research centers which are focused on these areas of excellence, and we'll come back to this. We tend to focus on cancer, neuroscience, behavioral medicine, molecular medicine, cardiovascular biology, genomics, regenerative and reparative medicine, disease prevention, and pediatric care. These are areas that are of great excellence, and in fact, we have limited competition in the state and certainly in the nation for a lot of these areas. We're ranked number 12 in American Heart Association funding. We have state-of-the-art core facilities in genomic cell imaging and proteomics. And we have a life sciences business development incubator. This has allowed us to translate a lot of these findings to the business place. In other words, as you have discoveries that actually mean things to patients, you're able to put them in small companies, help those companies develop, and then allow them to proceed to become independent businesses. Now, the economic impact of the university is significant, and you can see an image there of what we call the economic ripple. The university starts, but of course the graduates of the university produce a fair amount of income themselves, and there's commercialization of the research, there's health sciences programs, there's a healthcare provider growth, and so on and so forth. And so our economic impact to the immediate area is $2.1 billion. Or about for every $1 of state appropriations, we provide $14 in benefit. It's a tremendous investment, and this is why most states have heavily invested in academic health centers, because they do produce significant economic engine. But if you don't just look at the direct impact, you look at the impact of the graduates and the businesses that we generate, that economic impact on a yearly basis to the state of Georgia is about $8.3 billion, or $55 for every $1 that the state provides us in state appropriations. Again, the return is huge, and you will see why some other states are heavily investing in their academic health centers. And as we think about this, this computer meditates if he's going to go to the next slide or not, and maybe not. There we go. So our vision is to become a leading academic health center and a top 50 research university while transforming the institution and the region into a healthcare and biomedical research destination. Now, let me just go through this just for a second. What does this mean? We're going to become a leading academic health center. That means the integrated health center, which includes research, education, clinical care, and it's integrated. And as I said, the only other institution like that in Atlanta is Emory. We're going to become a top 50 research university. In the past, we have been seen only as a place where we train technicians or we train high-level healthcare providers. And that is part of our mission, but certainly we are much more than that. We are a large academic health center and we are a large research institution, and that is something that I intend to make sure that we become increasingly more recognized, and we're just not just that high-tech school in Augusta. And finally, we're not going to do it alone. We're actually going to transform the institution and the region into a biomedical and research destination. This is what I've seen when I spent 15 years at UAB. This is what's happened in Chattanooga. This is what's happening in Charleston. This is what's happening in a large number of areas, and we intend to make sure that our state is a biomedical research and healthcare destination. And computer thinks about it if it's going to give me the next slide or not, and maybe not. So the trends in biomedical research, and I'd like to now take a pause here. I'm going to try to go quickly over 6 or 7 slides to show you where research in general is going. The trends in general are determined by 4 forces in the environment. Some of them are determined by novel discoveries. Fetal determinants of adult disease, inflammation as a basis for disease. These are things that are new. They are discovered. People say, these are good things. We're going to jump on this bandwagon and understand this better. Other trends in biomedical research are determined by new technology, molecular imaging, proteomics. These are things that are new tools that allows us to say, okay, now we have a tool that we can answer a question. Others are determined by public concern, by yourselves, obesity, adiposity, diabetes, child health. These are things that the public comes to us and says, We are concerned about this. Help us understand it. And finally, of course, they're also determined by the funding agencies. If the NIH decides that they're going to pay for some things and not others, that's going to drive research. If we say we're going to invest in bioterrorism, that's going to drive research. So there are four forces, if you would, that determine biomedical research. Now, where is the medicine of tomorrow, the healthcare of tomorrow going? Well, it's going to be three things. It's going to be predictive. We're going to spend a lot of money trying to determine tools that will allow us to predict who's going to develop a disease, how bad is the disease going to be, how well is it going to respond. It's going to be very specific. It's going to be very personalized. We're not going to just give the same medicine to everybody. We're going to say, you, according to your genetics, your characteristics, your history, your markers in your blood, you're going to need this kind of drug, and this person is going to do better with that kind of therapy. And finally, it's going to be preemptive. We're not going to wait for things to happen. We're going to begin to treat them well in advance. And that's really the trend, if I had to put it in one slide, of where we are going in healthcare. Of course, that is all interrelated, and it's also participatory. And that means that patients and communities have to participate in this. This is not an isolated ivory tower effort. Everybody has to be responsible. Individuals have to be responsible for participating in this process. Now, a few more trends. The data of the future is going to be different. The data future will not be easily destructible. It has to be quantitative, means you have to measure it, you can't just feel it, and a large number of other issues. So data management is becoming very important in research, because in the past, research was very easy to manage it. Well, we know when people are sick and we know when they're not sick. But the question today is, if you're going to be preemptive, how do you know they're not getting sicker until they actually get very sick? How do you measure it? How do you keep data on 20, 30, 40, 50,000, 100 million individuals in a bank that won't be corruptible and will still be available 100 years from now? These are kind of things that we are working for into the future. The solution of complex disease problems are actually going to be very interrelated. We talk about multi- and interdisciplinary research. It's not just one discipline saying we found the solution, because it will be in the genetics and in the behavior and the diet and nutrition, and it'll be infectious diseases and environmental factors and many other issues. And so we have to put that picture together, and in a way we're going to have to create models that are multidisciplinary, meaning lots of disciplines come together to think about one thing, or sometimes we have to create totally new disciplines, totally new fields that did not exist there before, that is required by these new complex problems. Remember that the approaches of the past will not help us address the challenges of the future. Now, translational research, you hear a lot about translational research in a scheme. In this drawing, this is what translational research is. It starts in the preclinical, what we call the bench side. The investigators and the researchers come up with ideas. They then begin to apply it to the patients. That's what we call the bedside. And eventually, once that patient has responded, we then decide that we're going to apply it to our communities. We're going to create guidelines for treatment and so on and so forth. Those are the three main steps of translational research. It's a little more complicated than that. And I'm going to give you the scheme here, which is very long, simply to say that we have to help this translational process from the beginning, from the idea process, all the way to the commercialization process. There's many steps there, and we intend to have those systems in place to help that. Because what happens often is that investigators have great ideas, they never come to fruition, or they may get ideas and then they get grants and then they never get translated, or they may get translated to some patients but never really actually commercialized. And so those are all barriers that we need to address if we're going to improve health care rapidly. And as you can understand, the rate of change in health care is rapidly changing. Now, this is a box that is very, very complicated, and it's meant to be complicated. This is two graphs of how a particular organ in a cell works. It's almost like an electrical diagram. And the issue that we're understanding is that systems in biology are not simple. They're complex. And so how do you begin to understand these complicated systems that are increasingly more full of data? And so we have a number of systems, if you would, under what we call the system biologies. We have lots of tools, nanotechnologies, bioimaging, proteomics, gene expression. All of these are new tools that allows us to understand what happens at the molecular level. No longer can we say, well, if you're diabetic, your sugar is high. But the question then, if your sugar is high, what happens in the cell? What happens in the pancreas? What happens in your brain? What happens in your vascular tissue? How do these are interconnected? And so on and so forth. And that's how we're going to be able to actually strike at the heart of these diseases. Now, imaging itself has advanced. I was going to show you some images, but they take a lot of memory. But there's molecular imaging. We actually can see how cells are reacting now in vivo. This is something that is amazingly new, but we need to be able to see that. We need to be able to image a cell as it's working through a particular process, and imaging in animals. Let me move forward a little bit as to our challenges. One of the things that I think this committee needs to be aware of is that we are falling very short of producing the necessary scientists in our world. If you look at the graph on the left side, that is the proportion of scientists that China or the European Union is producing relative to ours. So, for example, in 2010, the European Union is producing almost 2 scientists for our every one. China is producing 1.5 scientists for one for each of our scientists. And so we are beginning to become underproduced in scientists, and that means in minds. If you look on the right side, you can see the number of U.S. doctorates awarded. And you can see that we are flat since 1995 in the number of awards to scientists are granted in the United States to U.S.-born individuals. We are continuing to grant more foreign individuals because they are interested in science. And so we're having challenges here because we are not developing national minds to address biomedical research. Now, there's nothing wrong with bringing in individuals from the outside to be driving this. I am a product of immigrant families, but the point is the external world, the global world, is becoming much more competitive, much faster, and we are not. And we are trying to rest on our laurels. So let me come back to the university now. This is the trends, as I've shown you. A lot of complexity, a lot of data, a lot of different systems. We need to understand how this works. And these are some examples of what we have at our university. We have a vascular biology center, which is actually nationally renowned. It looks at a number of areas: diagnosis and prevention and therapy of kidney diseases, discovery of gender-specific differences in vascular function, prevention of microvascular disease and acute lung injury, and looking at new targets, and this is where my own laboratory is involved, new targets for therapy in diabetes and obesity-related disorders. This is a lot of very important areas. We are actually one of the top 5 centers in the nation in regards to vascular biology research. We have a Center for Biotechnology and Genomic Medicine. It actually has the world's largest database and biorepository for type 1 diabetes. It has about $70 million in NIH funding since its creation just in 2002, just a decade ago. And it's extraordinarily, provides a tremendous amount of service to Georgia because it does a lot of genetic screening for free for many Georgians. Our neurobiology center is extraordinarily advanced. This is Dr. Joe Chen. He is one of the nationally known scientists in this. These are some of the covers of where his stories have been published. He's worked tremendously on mice and their brain function, understanding how we can improve brain function, certainly in animals, and then in humans. We have a regenerative and reparative medicine program. And we work very closely with Fort Gordon, with the VA, with other programs because wounded warriors clearly need to be regenerated and repaired. Many of us, of course, as we age, require the same. And so there's a lot of work in bone growth and repair of injuries and understanding different repairs, particularly after strokes. Our Georgia Prevention Institute is a significant asset to Georgia. It really has allowed us to understand how to implement prevention both in childhood and in adults as part of the control for obesity, control for cardiovascular disease and diabetes. It has about $74 million in NIH funding since its inception, and it's really been addressing for 3 decades with the community, which is very unique, a number of issues: ethnic disparities in cardiovascular disease and diabetes, childhood obesity and its problems, and the genetic and environmental contributions to many disease processes. This is a tremendous tool and a very well recognized asset that Georgia has. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about cancer. You know, we are, as I mentioned earlier, the largest cancer center outside of Atlanta. And we have an obligation to actually provide service to all Georgians in regards to cancer therapy. For good or for bad, most of the entities that are in Atlanta are busy and focus primarily on Atlanta, and we tend to focus, of course, on the entirety of the state. About 40,000 Georgians are diagnosed annually with cancer. About 15% of cancer deaths occur annually in our state. There's a rate of about 183 cancer cases per 100,000 citizens, and this exceeds the national average. 80% of Georgia's counties exceed the national cancer death rate. Cancer is a significant issue in Georgia. Some of the rural counties exceed by 250 deaths per 100,000 people, so it's very high. Some areas of Georgia have very high cancer death rates. Cancer is at war in Georgia. Now, our Cancer Research Center does a number of things. It does very cutting-edge research. These are examples. Cancer immunology and immunotherapy, we're very much leading the nation. Developmental therapeutics, molecular oncology, prevention and control. We participate in over 150 trials with physicians throughout the state. We host Georgia's only tumor tissue bank, which is funded through the Georgia Cancer Coalition. We provide multidisciplinary patient and family-centered care, and we have community and minority outreach. And so we're very good at studying the impact of underserved minorities on the impact of cancer on underserved minorities and health disparities. We have a cancer clinical trials unit, which is moving the discoveries from the laboratories to the patient bedside quickly. We have phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. And for many patients, this actually represents the only option that they have. Either they have to leave the state to look for other research options, or they have to come to us. And this is one of those unique assets that, again, Georgia has, not often recognized, but certainly has. A couple of areas, and I'm going to go through about 8 areas just to show you some examples of research that we do. We have new therapies for neuroblastoma, which is a common cancer of the brain for young children and accounts for 15% of all childhood cancer deaths. We are investigating a plant-derived drug for its ability to reduce cancer growth. We're performing clinical trials of a drug that actually inhibits a protein that suppresses the immune system for cancer. We're testing a whole new compound that may be able to make brain tumors more susceptible to radiation and chemotherapy. We're studying how to combine a vaccine with a drug to actually figure out how to stimulate the immune system to attack cancer cells. We're developing immunotherapy strategies that enhance the efficacy of just standard conventional cancer therapies. And we're using state-of-the-art DNA technology to figure out, 1, what is the causes of the cancer, and 2, can this give us a key on how to personalize the treatment for these patients? And finally, we're looking at new multi-drug strategies for the treatment of many cancers, including leukemia. This is just a sort of a compendium of different approaches, so you can see that our Cancer Center actually is using different approaches to attack the issue of cancer. Now, what about cancer treatment options in Georgia? I do think that the committee has to be very aware that we are fairly deficient in this. We are home to only one of the nation's 66 NCI-designated cancer centers, and that is Emory's Winship Cancer Institute, which actually became NCI-designated only a couple years ago. Alabama, a much smaller state, much poorer state, has had an NCI-designated cancer center for over 20 years. Adjoining states like Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida have heavily invested in their NCI-designated cancer centers. They are providing tens of millions of dollars to create these things, and that is why you having patients from Georgia go to Florida or go to Alabama or go to South Carolina or go to Tennessee. And that, I think, is a complete, I think it's something that I would worry significantly about. I, as the president of the Georgia Health Sciences University, think that our patients in Georgia should remain in Georgia with their families to obtain care. This is not about machismo, if you would, or about being state oriented. This is more than that. Patients do better if they stay with their families in the state. They do much better. Having to ship patients away to care, to Mayo and other patients, is not the right approach for our patients. And so the proposed elimination of $2.5 million in support for the Georgia Health Sciences University's Cancer Research Center in fiscal year 12 really down from $5 million that was committed originally, is a significant problem barrier to our ability to become an NCI cancer designated center. We are investing heavily in that at the university level. We need the state support to do this. Other states are providing 4 times that amount for their NCI designated cancer centers, even after they become NCI designated. Where are we as a university going? Well, we're transforming. I should tell you that we are reinventing the university. It's not just a new name, but we're truly reinventing it. We're integrating, meaning we're bringing together the entire enterprise. I'm not only the president of the university, I'm the CEO of the health system, and I determine the destiny, if you would, of the entirety. Of course, not personally, but through my team, and that's how we're doing that. That will then lead to alignment. That means people in our enterprise will work together, row together in the same direction as hard as they can, and that will produce a massive asset for the state to address a large number of issues, including biomedical research. And finally, we're bringing in long-term strategic planning because we have a vision of where we want to be and who we want to be in 2020 and in 2030. And so as we proceed, we need to remember that we will succeed. We will succeed because we're going to get your help in doing that, but we will succeed also because we are now only one of 2 vertically and horizontally integrated academic health centers in Georgia. And so we're able to address the emerging challenges of the changing healthcare environment, the clinical and research translational needs of the future, the continuum of healthcare, health professions education. This is a unique asset for the state of Georgia. We have over 500 integrated healthcare providers. Very few medical centers in the state can say they have 500 providers, mostly physicians, that are part of the mission and buy into the vision. We generate tomorrow's healthcare leaders. That's what we do. We don't just generate nurses and doctors. We generate tomorrow's healthcare leaders. We have recognized areas of research and clinical care excellence. I've shown you just a few today. We have very broad reach throughout the state of Georgia and actually into parts of South Carolina. So we are a statewide entity. We have demonstrated ability to sustain long-term partnerships with many communities, including the military and state agencies. We provide correctional health, so 80 correctional facilities throughout the state. We are one of 2 centers providing neonatal screening. We provide care to war veterans in the War Veterans Nursing Home, and so on and so forth. So we have lots of partnerships that we have developed and are able to demonstrate. We have really, our communities are now ready to align. There's been a lot of discord in the past, but we are bringing our communities together to align with us. And we are basically dedicated to the welfare of Georgians. We've been doing this for 200 years, and we intend to continue to do that. Last, a couple of slides. I'd like to invite you to the opening of the College of Dental Medicine. This is one of the larger buildings in the United States. We are Georgia's only College of Dental Medicine. That will be September the 23rd, 2011. We'll send an official invitation, but I would like you to pencil it in. I think you will be very impressed with this facility that will continue to help us develop Georgia's dentists and dental specialists, but more importantly, help us further dental research. And finally, just in the back of your mind, the second part of that building is called the Education Commons building. That Education Common is allowing us to have additional classroom space to expand our medical and dental education. As you know, you've asked us to expand our medical and dental education. We can't do that with additional space. We're actually living in buildings currently that are slated to be demolished. If I was actually in California, in my old state that I just came from, that would be illegal. So I appreciate your attention, and I hope I've covered a lot of ground today, and I've gone through very quickly. We're going to be providing copies of the slides, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Wait a minute. What number are you there? 27. Got it.
Great. So where are the dental building? The dental building is now in about 5 or 7 years ago. There was a property adjacent to the campus of the university which was called the Gilbert Manor Community. That was purchased through arrangements of the city, and that property now lies, the building lies in the Gilbert Manor property that was ceded to the university. But it is on the campus of the university. As you are aware, our campus is currently bivalved by a street and we are working on trying to unify the campus because that will be an important asset and in our ability to grow. But that is where that property is located. Thank you for asking.
Mash your button so I can tell where you are. Got it.
Any thoughts on increasing residency programs throughout the state? I mean, we produce a lot of medical students at MCG, Morehouse, Mercer, and, of course, Emory. And yet we don't have quite the number of residency spots throughout the states. Any collaboration or thoughts on this?
So GME, graduate medical education, just to put everybody on the premise, and that's a very, very good question. Physicians, when they finish, MDs, students who finish at the MDs, actually cannot practice. They have to carry on what we call postgraduate medical education, some degree what we call residency. That's different than in dentistry. When you finish dental school, you can actually proceed to practice into general dentistry. So, in fact, we cannot expand the supply of physicians without expanding not just the number of medical students graduating, but the number of residencies. The problem is that residency slots, GME slots, are determined not by the universities, but determined by the hospital. So, in fact, our hospital, as I said before, even just one hospital, provides 20% of the GME slots in the state and 75% of the graduate dental education slots in the state. So we're a relatively huge provider. We continuously work with other hospital systems to try to engage them in providing GME slots. But we actually can't force them or do anything because our authority over those health systems, as you can imagine, is limited. And this is why GME is such a difficult issue, because it's not determined by the university that generates those students. It's actually determined by the willingness of local hospitals to say, yes, we will set up these training programs. And they're actually accredited through a different body than what accredits the medical schools. We're working with them in partnership. One of the things that we are now in the process of finalizing is we've created a unit at the university that will help hospitals, that will provide consulting services to hospital to help them design their initial phases. We're using a lot of out-of-state consultants that at the end of the day we actually have the talent internally to help these hospital systems do that. The biggest barrier is the initial costs of establishing those GME programs. They can just, for a 16-person, 16-resident program in, say, family medicine, in primary care, that could run as high as a couple of $1 million during the phase before we start getting federal dollars. So there has to be some seed money programs. We're working on that through the USG. We're going to be proposing some programs to address that, and then our own universities providing consulting services to help enhance that. But it's complex because we need to work with our hospital partners, Georgia Hospital Association, other organizations to actually get that done. But it's a very good question.
Back to the Representative Watson one more time. Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My brain is just ticking. Certainly, since I became a legislator 7 years ago, I have been very a big advocate of the bio world, and certainly we will always need to heal, feed, and fuel. So this is
Absolutely.
Very important. And hopefully we have a governor now that's willing to be more open about the bio world. So that's a good thing. And of course, when you talk about the cancer treatment centers, of course, here at the Capitol, it's always policy, politics. So I'm sure me as well as other people would like to see more facilities that we are able to open for cancer. Could you explain why Georgia has such a high rate of cancer?
Well, there's actually a number of reasons. In many ways, we have also been early on in industrial sites, and there is a number of environmental toxins that have actually permeated through our communities and actually has raised that. Smoking is a significant issue. Obesity is a massive driver of cancer. See, obesity itself is not just bad disease. I study obesity in my laboratory, and I will tell you that the largest hormonal organ of the body is our fat tissue. Fat produces over 100 different hormones that drive the growth of different tissues and sets up the stage for cancer. So our bad eating, lack of exercise, overweightness, smoking, drinking, and environmental factors related to our industry and past industry all contribute to our greater than average cancer rates.
Also, I'm reading a very interesting book right now talking about various kinds of cancers. At any point, have we ever claimed breast cancer, prostate cancer, an epidemic? Because there are lots of times we talk about epidemics.
Right.
But these, I don't remember that we've ever said that.
So you're absolutely correct. Prostate and breast cancer are very similar, by the way, genetically speaking. They affect men and women, but their mechanisms, meaning sex hormone dysregulation, is very common in both of those. We don't define them as an epidemic, mainly because they haven't reached the definitions of the CDC for epidemic. But to be fair, they are an epidemic, and they clearly are of significance. The good part about it is as we create personalized and individualized therapies, the death rates related to these cancers are beginning to decrease. So the rates of cancers for prostate and breast have continued to increase linearly, and of course I do agree, I think they're reaching epidemic levels. The death rates, however, has been successfully decreased, which is why having cancer centers is so critical to drive this. But I agree with you. I think that they've reached a rate that we could easily claim them to be an epidemic, but I'm not the official epidemic caller, so I'm going to leave that at that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Representative Kidd.
We saw a study last year, I believe, that showed that roughly half of the students that were going to medical schools and dental schools and so forth left the state, did not practice in Georgia, yet Georgia was spending money to educate them. Or you did anything to try to keep these people in Georgia?
Well, actually, that's not entirely true. About 60, for example, of our graduates, 67% end up practicing in Georgia, which is extraordinarily high for any school, whether it's state-funded or state-supported or not. I mean, we need to remember that Georgia Health Sciences University, only 16% of its budget is supported through state appropriations. But having said that, 90%, 95%, 99% of our students in many colleges are entirely all Georgians. What you're alluding to is the issue of GME. They have to leave the state to train, and then they have to come back. And then when they leave, there's always that risk that they'll get married out there, they'll find a partner out there, and they're never going to come back. So in fact, our ability to retain our students is highest if they train here, and then we have a GME slot for them here. Then about 75% of the individuals will stay in the state, which is extraordinarily high for relative to other states.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess it's my time then.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, you stated in your presentation, first of all, thank you for being here this morning,
Thank you.
that you all was having difficulties getting students involved into the process. What are you all doing to recruit more students into the field?
So we are not actually, Georgia Health Sciences University is actually very successful in getting students recruited. We actually do very well in student recruitment. What I showed is graphs of the United States as a whole. The United States as a whole has clearly begun to fall behind China and the European Union in the production of scientists and the new researchers of the future, which is why we have to invest significantly in biomedical research. Our university, in fact, has had a focus on research that is relatively new. About the last 15 years or so, although for years they've had good areas of research, they truly have not come into their own until about 10 to 15 years ago. And now we're beginning to heavily invest in becoming that research university because, in fact, we can't just provide good clinical care. We can't just train practitioners. At the end of the day, we have to develop the field because, obviously, we want to make sure our practitioners are cutting edge and our treatments are cutting edge. Okay. Good question.
Now, maybe I can ask a couple, but I'd like to follow on first with the residences. Now that you're fixing to open Athens, or at least someone's going to open Athens.
Well, Athens has been operational. So let me explain the Athens campus. This is a partnership campus with UGA. It's a very unique structure. Very few institutions around the country have actually been able to successfully have two separate institutions work together to collaborate to create a uniform campus. That campus is in UGA and has now been operational for 18, actually we opened in July. So I've been in the state for 9 months, and it seems like 2 years. But it's actually been open for 9 months. So we are fully operational. We have wonderful students. The program is developing very well. We're still in the process of recruiting faculty, and we're in the process of identifying clinical sites because, again, we're in need to find sites for our students. But we, as a university, have great experience doing that, and so we will continue to work in that regard. But we're up and running.
Well, my suggestion, and one you probably have already looked at, is residences for the Athens students. You have the hospital in Athens, but you also have a great hospital in Gainesville. That's, be a wonderful place for residences if you can talk them into it.
So we have been in conversations, our local dean as well as our College of Medicine, or MCG dean, have been in conversations with Athens Regional, Northeast Regional, Gainesville. We are continuing to have that conversation. This is a conversation that we actually have statewide. I recently gave a lecture to the Georgia Hospital Association on this topic. As I said, it's very complex because the environment today is not allowing a lot of experimentation and innovation. People are very conservative, and people are very concerned about their cash flow. But my worry is that if the hospital systems do not begin to invest really a fraction of their margin into the future of their physicians, we will then have a massive exodus of individuals as they retire. I mean, as soon as the market recovers, I think you all understand that the number of individuals who will be retiring from the medical field is going to be enormous. And when that happens, there's going to be a massive vacuum. So we can all talk about healthcare reform and providing care to the underserved and all these things, but if we don't have sufficient physicians, that's not going to happen. So we continue to converse with them. Yes, we are actively talking to them. I just want to stress to this committee that at the end of the day, the university only can use its bully pulpit and its influence, but not any tangible form of control.
First, I'd like to thank you for your positive attitude, saying we will succeed.
We will, absolutely.
Okay, I'll bet on you then.
Thank you, sir. A lot of people are, and including myself, so thank you.
Is there any correlations between, other than fat, between cancer and diet?
So certainly...
I ask this question because of your, we used to call it telemedicine. It's not called that anymore. Your reach where...
Still telemedicine, yes.
Yeah, okay, you got strokes, and then your heart attacks are similar in terms of locations and this kind of thing. And we're known as the stroke belt of the United States. So, and that, what is it they call the coastline of Georgia is supposed to be even a worst case stroke belt. So that's the reason for the question.
So the obesity itself is a significant driver of inflammation. That means that we tend to have subchronic inflammation, which causes damage to blood vessels and increases the risk of, say, strokes or clots, if you would. But in addition, the types of foods we eat, of course, makes a big difference. We tend to eat a fair amount of animal fat in this region. Animal fat per se is very inflammatory and leads to increased damage of our blood vessels. A lot of starch, high-level starch we tend to eat in the South is also very damaging, in fact, to our blood vessel system. So you're absolutely correct. It is not just the obesity level, but it's also the kind of foods we eat. I must say that I'm struggling with that since I arrived 9 months ago. I absolutely love the cuisine, but I'm gaining weight, and unfortunately, it's not helpful. So yes, our diet traditionally has not stimulated that. And that is one of the reasons, again, that cancer rates have actually been high in Georgia, but for a long time, not just recently.
My next question is a little bit broader than scientists. You said the ratio of scientists being produced in Europe is 2-to-1 to the U.S., and in China, 1.5 to 1. And not long ago, I read a short article where the Chinese are laughing at us, where we look at Europe as being over the hill and we're the innovators. China is now looking at the United States as sliding on into the European status. And we need to do something about that. So,
well, I will tell you that I think it's one of the things that I, one of my functions as president of the Georgia Health Sciences University is to provide a global view of where we are. I think sometimes we sort of look at our own local communities and feel pretty good about ourselves, but at the end of the day, this is a competitive world. Today, as I tell individuals, and I'll tell anybody who'll listen, I'm not competing within Augusta or even within central Georgia. We're competing with Alabama and Florida and in all those states. But on top of that, we're actually competing with California, New York, and we're competing with the world. Because today, medicine is global, discoveries are global. And yes, we have to understand history, and I will always say that I would never underestimate China. Not because of anything, but because over the last 1,000 years, China has dominated the world's economy for 700 of those. So we want to make sure that our leadership in sciences that we've had for the past 100 years continues into the future. And the only way we're going to do that is to continue to invest. We're beginning to have an attitude that, oh, we have the best anyway, we don't have to worry about it. And that is the first step toward failure and the first step toward mediocrity. And I intend to make sure that the message is loud and clear that we invest in these areas because the return on investment, as I showed early on, is massive.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Z.
you.